What's good, everyone? We're going to be following up with the multi-agent architecture series. If you haven't already watched it, I'll link it down below, but I have a general multi-agent architecture kind of video series or video that I made before this. It'll just overview some of the different architectures that we're going to walk through and implement. And today will be the first one of those, so it'll be agents as tools. Also kind of displaying a bit of a supervisor architecture, but we'll build on this example to kind of display even more prominent ones for all. What I'll do really quickly is I'll whiteboard that out, just in terms of how this would look, when you would use it, just give some more context from the video that we originally shared. And then what we'll do is we'll get hands-on as always. We'll help set this up using the Strands SDK. I'll link the intro video for that as well down below. This is once again the one released by AWS, the open source one. So you can take a look at the implementation details, see if you're comfortable with this framework. But a lot of the same concepts you can apply with different frameworks, such as LangGraph or Crua as well. Whatever you're more comfortable with, we'll have series around those as well. So with that being said, let me share my whiteboard quickly. Let's just take a few minutes to maybe talk through agents as tools, kind of revisiting it and overviewing what we already visited kind of in that multi-agent architecture video series. But right here, if we see, right, the essence with agents as tools is that we're going to have a supervisor agent. And within the supervisor agent, we'll have many different sub-agents basically that are very, very specialized. So you might have agents, right, specifically for something like research. You might have an agent that's specifically around coding, helping with coding-based queries. And then you might have an agent that's specifically around maybe healthcare inquiries or something of that sort. So it's very specialized agents. That's the word I'm going to keep using in this video specifically. You should go this route of having these agents as tools, basically, when you have very specialized agents that have very niche or specific purposes, basically. The whole essence for this, right, using this kind of topology or this architecture that we're working with is that we want to be able to limit the scope of each of these agents and basically only give the tools that they need access to. So if you have different tools that your research agent might have accessible to it, you want to limit the scope to just that research agent, basically. So only the research agent should have access to those different types of tools. This is where this is more efficient than having a single agent with maybe 10 separate tools, whereas each of these agents might have 3 specific tools each that help them with their cause. So this type of kind of agents as tool architecture is very, very common, especially in the supervisor pattern, right, where you might have these specialized agents with specific purposes, because then this supervisor agent will basically make the choice in terms of what agent to work with, which agent is the most appropriate. So each one of these will have their own prompts, kind of delineating that. And then you're also going to have an orchestrator or supervisor prompt. You might hear both of those same words. Like I said, there's always so many different buzzwords that get mixed up here and things of that sort. But here, this orchestrator or supervisor, they will also have their own prompt basically saying when to use what agent for what. And I kind of adhered to this, right, in the initial architecture video too. This doesn't have to be a case where just a singular agent's called. It might be a sequential invocation of multiple of these. But for use cases like that, I kind of like streamlining my workflow more through a graph-based architecture. But you're not limited here. The only thing, though, is that you're limited to the autonomy of the supervisor agent because it's going to make the choice at the end of the day in terms of what tool to use, what to work with. If you're looking for more kind of granularized kind of control on your end, then going the graph route might be a little more efficient. That's another video that will be coming in the coming weeks. But like I said, take a look at that architecture video to really see if your use case is kind of fit for using this architecture. So with that being said, I don't want to spend too long in the whiteboard itself. I'll hop out of this screen. And what we'll do is we'll go to our good old friend cursor. And I'll link the Git repo down below. If you see there's a just hop to my GitHub right here. There should be a Strands agent sample right here that we're working with. And within this, you'll find the multi-agent samples, at least at this time of writing a recording, there will be an agents as tools kind of directory right here. Now, what I've done here is we're going to work with the Strands SDK. Once again, take a look at the kind of intro video for that. If you're familiar with different agent frameworks, it's really not much of a learning curve. But what I've done here is I've made a bit of a sample or mini project that we could work with. And what we can get started with, right, is the purpose of this. We want to display, once again, these different specialized agents and how we can kind of use them as tools for our supervisor agent to work with. And if you notice, there will be 2 separate sub-agents that I'm working with, 2 specialists. I'm going to have one specialist that's a research agent that I'm going to give web access to basically to be able to kind of look up things or look up links that I might share and retrieve that information and kind of summarize that content for me. And then I added another AWS assistant where if I have any questions basically about my AWS account, I want this kind of assistant or agent to be able to answer it in terms of it. So I have specific prompts for each of the sub agents. And if you notice, they're completely different specialties. They're very, very different in terms of their job functionality, and this should make it easier for my orchestrator or supervisor agent. And you'll see I've also added something known as a main system prompt right here. And here within the system prompt, I once again specify which tool to use when, but you'll see in reality, these are actually agents that are kind of wrapped up by that tool decorator that Strands provides. But it's very important, right? Like, I know everyone brings up prompt engineering, and it can be kind of funny that just plain English can have this much of an impact. But if these prompts are not clear, basically, and especially in the main prompt, in terms of what tool to use when, you're going to notice that your LLM, no matter how powerful or how intelligent it is going to struggle. Speaking of the LLM itself, for at least this session, what we'll use as the Bedrock is use Claude Sonnet 4 through Bedrock. So you want to make sure that your user has access to this model. You can optionally use whatever other LLM you want to. Strands, as we said, is kind of model agnostic, so you can use something like OpenAI, Olama, whatever you're working with, but I've just kind of stuck to Bedrock, and Sonnet 4 performs really well. Now that we have the actual details in terms of what we're trying to achieve in terms of our different agents, what we can do is we can kind of encapsulate these in the tools object that I was talking about. So if we remember in our Strands intro video, there's this tool decorator, which is basically saying this is a tool that our agent can kind of parse or work with, basically, right? Strands comes built in with different tools. There's two of them that we're going to be providing to our agents, our specialized agents. One is the HTTP request tool, which is basically kind of like any web search with a link. And then the use AWS, which is actually pretty neat. And maybe we'll build some more sample projects there as we explore Strands. But here, for any questions specifically about AWS, but also anything within your account, as we'll notice, this is a very handy tool here. So I didn't want to build my own custom tools here, but you can bring your own depending on your use case. But I'm just going to use some of the ones that Strands natively provides. I import different prompts that I'm working with. And if you notice now, I specify two different tools that we're working with. The first tool is a research assistant. And within this, if you notice, I'm actually going to create an agent. Remember, this whole architecture is known as agents as tools. We're going to present these tools, which actually have agents wrapped within them, right? I know it sounds a little counterintuitive, but when we present them as tools to our supervisor agent, it can make that choice. So for the research agent, basically, I'm going to pass in that research assistant prompt, explaining when to use it. I'm going to pass in the HTTP request here. And then basically within this request, using kind of the Strands documentation, I'm just saying get or retrieve basically the text that's within this URL that's provided, and then basically convert it to text, and then parse it and summarize it. And you'll see that I've also specified that in the doc strings. Trying to use best practices here, especially if you're using something like Cursor. I think I coded maybe like a solid 30% of all of this in terms of the actual lines of code that you're seeing here, because I just made a probably honestly very crappy Python file, and then I had Cursor kind of modularize all of this with proper documentation and comments. So use AI tools in that sense where you still understand the functionality of what you're doing. You should build that core logic yourself and use assistance where needed. But then when you want to clean it up and provide kind of good documentation to make life easier for your agent or LLM, right? You can use something like Cursor in that sense. So now, if we go through this, I'm basically parsing that text, and that's what I want to return for this tool using that agent. So if you see, it's the agent that's actually going to be executing the tool it has available for you. So there's the tool with the agent, and then that agent has different tools accessible for it. And each of these agents might have multiple tools. In this case, I just have the HTTP request, but maybe you have a shell command where you write that summary down, right? After getting that summary. So you can add more tools and expand on this project. I've defined that first tool there. And similarly now with the AWS Assistant, for any query that comes in, once again, I've documented this pretty clearly or properly here, where Cursor did. And I've defined this agent right here. I defined the tools that I want accessible for that agent, which is that built-in one from Strands. And then basically, right, I parse that response and try to get an output back there. And then I've just listed a bit of a utility function right here where I can return all the agents so that it displays a little more clearly for you all when you kind of run through this example. But at a high level, that's really the bulk of what we're working with, right? These two tools that we define are just wrappers around agents. And now what we want to do is we want to bring this all together where our orchestrator agent can kind of make the right decision from this. So I've made a bit of a orchestrator class here. And in this orchestrator class, we're going to have our model, which is Claude, which is powering all of these agents, by the way. And what we're going to do is, and by the way, just back to that point real quick, when I say it's Claude powering all these, you can also pick different models. So if we return to the tools.py here, if you want a different kind of model for your research agent here, like OpenAI, or maybe like even Nova through Bedrock, you can specify that model here. By default, we're just using that Claude 4 model that I was talking about. But if I return to this orchestrator class, I'm going to retrieve my Bedrock model that I've configured. And then for this orchestrator agent or supervisor agent here, I'm going to specify the Claude 4 model. I'm going to pass in the main system prompt, and I'm going to pass in the tools. And the tools that we have available, if you remember this utility function, that's going to return our research assistant agent and our AWS assistant agent, which have been wrapped up by that tool decorator. And all that we have here is some utilities, basically, to talk about the tool calls. If you'll notice within Strands, I encourage you to take a look at this. There's a lot of nice kind of features in terms of tokens, input and output that are returned for you, and then the tool use that you want to be able to track as you kind of expand the scope of your projects. But basically, just kind of sanitize and kind of clean all of that information up for you to understand. And then if we come here to the main Python function that we're dealing with here, you'll notice that I'm just instantiating that class that wraps around my main orchestrator agent. And here I have a list of pre-built queries. And if you take a look at these queries, right, they're very specifically supposed to hit each of the agents. And we'll see if our orchestrator makes the right choice here. So while I run that, we'll kind of walk through this. If I execute this right here, you'll see that it's going to iterate through those queries basically. And if you notice, for this first one, just using our own intuition, right, when I pass in this link, we want the research agent to be executing there. For the second one, it's specifically our S3 buckets in my own account, and same with the third about SageMaker endpoints. We want it to be able to use the AWS assistant or tool there. And then the fourth one, ideally, it should not use either of these tools or agents because this is a general knowledge query. And if you'll notice, even within the main assistant prompt in the config file, we specified that, right? So I said for any general query, basically, use your own general domain knowledge. I don't think I actually specified that there, but it might infer that. But ideally, you should add something like that. That's a mistake on my end or a miss on my end. Add something like that where it's like if there's any queries that don't match either of these, use your general knowledge, just to kind of distinguish it even more there. But if you see here, I also asked for a bit of an explanation. You can kind of take that part out if you want to play with this example on your own. But if we take a look, right, we'll see that it's going through these queries. We can take a quick look at query number 1. When I said, can you research the following link? You'll see that it's going through the different tools that it can use. And you'll see that the tool it uses or ended up using, which we parsed from the Strands kind of like output metadata, is the research assistant itself. And then we'll see the response here, the summary in terms of what we're working with. And we'll see that there's a summary in terms of documentation page. Strands agent is a lightweight framework for building AI agents. Great, it used the agent that we're expecting or the tool that we're expecting. For listing all the S3 buckets in my account, here it clearly uses the use AWS tool, which means the agent which has access to that. And you'll see it lists out all the different kind of S3 buckets in my account here as well. And then you can see, since I added it in the prompt, you can see the reasoning that it gave to. I used the AWS Assistant tool. Your query was specifically about AWS services, about S3 in your account, and you'll see that there's something similar once again, even with the SageMaker endpoints. So the main essence here, right, while this continues running, and I think query 4 will go there, you'll see for 3, it once again used the AWS Assistant here as well. The main essence here, right, is that we have very specialized agents, and this is a very simple use case, right? In reality, your research agent might have many different sub-tools. Rather than having all those tools just accessible to one agent, when you make them accessible to just specific agents that only need that, right, then it becomes much easier for you to track any potential errors. And it's also visually a lot easier for you as kind of a end user to be able to track this. Right, I have my orchestrator agent, I have my research agent, which has access to HTTP tool. Then I have my AWS agent, which has access to the use AWS built-in tool. So you've kind of modularized your workflow and made it simpler to kind of trace how your agent might be thinking, rather than potentially having way too many tools present for a single agent and it becoming a bit of a nightmare, or really confusing for the LLM in terms of what tool to properly use. So that's why techniques such as tools as agents, agents as tools, I might have mixed up that word a few times there, but agents as tools are really good for these specialized use cases because it can really streamline these workflows and make it simple rather than just having a singular agent with multiple tools. And if you'll see here for question 4, we ended this right here. you'll see that it answered this appropriately, but it also didn't have to use any of the specialized tools that we gave it access to, or those agents that we provided via those tools, because it could use its general knowledge here, basically. And like I said, for all of this, you can use something like Cursor. If you'll notice, I had one really bad Scratch Python file to start all this, and my Git commit history on that repo right there. And I basically had Cursor kind of really clean this all up. So another use case, just kind of another point to add on here, in terms of how you can use AI for your own kind of like benefits when prototyping. But obviously, you should understand this core logic and kind of business logic yourself and implement that before going that route. So yeah, I think that's mainly what I had in terms of introducing this architecture today, at least. What we'll do is we're going to continue to complicate things, explore more complex workflows, see where things such as Swarm or Graph or custom-based workflows will be handy for you. But maybe take a look at this just to get started with. See how you can apply that for your own use cases. That's normally how I learn best. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below in the comments. Any doubts, any feedback, or any thoughts, you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever it is you feel comfortable in. I'll do my best to get back. But thank you as always for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. And I will be back very, very shortly. Thank you.